Welcome everybody to the Reign of Jafar. Give the video a like if you're excited. I've got 11 of the best new decks for you today, focusing mainly on the new stuff. So there's still decks which are very similar, like Amethyst Steel and Ruby Amethyst, which you can still play to great success. But I wanted to really try and focus in on some of the more exciting new things, while also making sure I've got the best builds for you possible. Card Market sponsor the video, and it's fascinating to have a look at the best sellers coming in to the new set, because you can really get an idea of what people are expecting to be good. And look at that, Tramp, and Lady, the top 3 selling cards. Obviously, we're not going to expect to see any of the new cards in here just yet, but within a week, I'm sure we will. Let's jump in then to Chernodogs, Amber and Emerald to kick things off in this video. It is the most hyped up deck of the set, as you can see from that Card Market graphic, and for good reason. Obviously, this deck won the biggest tournament that we had in the previous set. The closest thing to a Lorcana challenge we had was that Ravensburger tournament, and this was the winning deck, really by surprise, and the deck got a whole lot of new things. What did it get? Well, it got 2 new Lady cards and 1 new Tramp card. The first Lady is actually my contender here, this 1 cost for best card of the entire set. I don't think there's anything more that you could possibly ask for in a 1 cost character. It has the potential to quest for 3. It's got high willpower, which means it has great synergy with Rapunzel, and it also has the potential of having a high strength amount under the right conditions. And added to that, it's inkable. Honestly, Lady for me, possibly best 1-drop in the entire game. It's right up there. It is an absolutely extraordinary card, and not to mention it's also a really good shift target for the Lady that we had in the previous set. And speaking of Lady, this other Lady here in at 3 cost is another contender for best card in the set. I also think this one might see some play in Amber Steel songs, and it will be in the Amber Steel list I'm showing later on. Why is this card so good? Well, if you look at Ursula Deceiver in this deck, it's a really strong card, but this is an aggro deck, which playing a card like Ursula or Yzma, both costing 2, they're crucial cards, but they come with great tempo loss, right? You're not developing the board very wide. You're slowing yourself down. Well, suddenly with Lady, you can use Ursula and Yzma as really important effects with a tremendously larger amount of tempo, because suddenly you've got 2 bodies on the board, which is going to be great for your Tramp 7 cost, making that cheaper. But you're putting 2 bodies on the board, you're putting 3 questing power down. It's good for Cricky. It just does exactly what you want to do with the deck. And rather than having to lose so much tempo playing an Ursula Deceiver at the right moment, you can play Lady into Ursula or Lady into whatever other card you want, and it gives you huge tempo potential. The truth is Lady on her own is just a 3 cost 2/2 that quests for 2. If she had no ability, obviously she wouldn't see play, but it's not like it's going to be completely terrible in every spot. A vanilla version of this card would be a 3/3 that quests for 2. So she has a really powerful ability. She's inkable. Great card, and I think in this deck, again, a shift target if you so desire, a very fascinating option. The other new card is this 6 cost Tramp card. Again, another contender for best card of the new set, and that's why this deck is being so hyped up. Tramp here is during an opponent's turn, whenever one of your characters is banished, you may draw a card. Usually this deck relied on Rapunzel for card draw or the Tramp for deck cycling. Well, now you've got like a really insanely consistent way of drawing cards, and that's going to give this deck a considerable more amount of staying power. You don't necessarily have to build this deck in quite the aggressive manner that you had to in the previous set. So obviously with all of these decks I'm sharing, you have to bear in mind that there is the serious fact and possibility that you should consider tweaking and experimenting with these decks, because I haven't played any of them. This is all theory crafting. As much as I like and rate myself as a deck builder, I like to build decks, and I think I'm a good at deck builder. You guys should not be afraid to tweak some things. Like the Cloud Kicker, I think is a card which is easy to remove entirely, but it's possibly a card that you want to include, and it's definitely possible you want to move away from quite as heavy on the aggro side of things and turn into a slightly more mid-range deck where you have a bit more mid-game staying power, some extra control tools, and all that sort of thing. Moving on to the next deck, let's take a look at Blurple. Now, Blurple, there's a bunch of different ways you can build it. It's one of the more fascinating decks. Now, a lot of people, when they play Blurple, they don't like to play any of these one costs like Churnabogs and Brooms, but long-term viewers of my channel know that these are two of my favorite cards in the game. But I am not sure on that dynamic. If you like playing the versions of Blurple with just pure top end, go ahead. But if you're like me, you want to play some Churnabogs and Brooms, those are the most flexible slots, I would say. You could cut the Brooms, cut the Churnabogs. You don't have as many good turn 1 plays, but you could fit in more top end things like Finders Keepers, more Hades, more Elsas. So what did this deck get that's new? Well, it got two very interesting cards. It got Monstro, which is definitely a card when I play Blurple on day one, I will be trying out more than just 2 copies of Monstro to really see how it feels, because I think it has really, really big potential. It's an 8-cost Inkable with Rush, 6/8, so it's really similar to Maui in many ways, but in Amethyst. And okay, it costs considerably more, but it can also quest. It's a very, very fascinating card, I have to say. And the ability has a very, very interesting mechanic because you can discard a card and then ready this character, but it can't quest. So you could quest with Monstro the turn that you could rush in, the next turn quest with it, then discard a card, bam, quest again, and still take a challenge. It is a very, very interesting card, and obviously in Blurple, where you've got that ramp, it's got huge potential. So I would immediately, on the first day of release, be trying out 4 copies of this card. But I just wanted to try and get a balance in some of these deck lists to really show you some of the different options and considerations, and then you can pick which cards you want to play more copies of, which cards you don't want to play, and all that sort of thing. The other card, which is absolutely fascinating, is Into the Unknown, which also has an enchanted version. It is a song, and it costs 3, which is really interesting with the Bell Apprentice Inventor, because obviously Bell's able to sing it, and you can put chosen exerted character into their player's inkwell face down and exerted. So you can use this on your own things, but more likely you're going to use it onto your opponent's cards. And one of the biggest weaknesses historically of Blurple is they do lack a little bit of control. So having a song which gains you control in a tempo form is absolutely fascinating. I think it's going to be particularly powerful with the Queen's Castle, which I think is a card which people are underestimating, and particularly underestimating in Blurple, because you often have an abundance of ink. Of course, you could play Scrooge McDuck's Manners in this slot instead, but for me, the Queen's Castle, that extra card draw that you can get off it with this extra ink that Sapphire provides, and now that extra bit of control and tempo from Into the Unknown, I think could be an absolutely devastating combo. Obviously, Monstro, Hades, the 2 Elsas, all help you achieve that little bit of control. You might want more crabs, you might want to try more Arnas. The truth is, now that we're in the 8th set, and we know we're going to be getting rotation right at the end of this 8th set, the card population right now in Lorcana is the most populated it's going to be, which means the decks are more difficult to build than ever. So there's more options, there's more different things you can choose, right? When we go into Fabled, the next set, we're only going to have 5 sets available in Core Constructed, whereas right now we have 8. So with these lists, definitely experiment, have some fun. That's why there's quite a lot of 2-ofs and that sort of thing. I just really wanted to highlight to my audience the cards that I would be most interested in testing, because testing is what it's all about. Up next, we've got a Bambi burn deck, or Bambi story burn, because I like to try and call these story decks. This is my hyper aggro deck that I wanted to share with you. It is very similar to the list which I played in the LCC last season to great success. Listen, people really underestimate how good hyper aggro is, and I think this deck is absolutely outstanding. Bambi as a new interesting addition is just something I wanted to test. I've got 2 copies. You might want to go to 3. It gains a law when you play it, but then whenever your opponent plays a card, it bounces back to your hand. So it's a weird card, but if ever it was going to work in a deck, it's going to be in a deck like this. Honestly, massively underestimated deck. Hyper aggro is so much better than people realize, and it's so much more difficult to play than people realize, and you're definitely going to catch a lot of people off guard. This is also super budget friendly. It's like a $60, $70 deck. So yeah, very, very cool one that I just wanted to remind you guys is still a really awesome deck, which I think has serious potential. Our next Steel Song. Now, Steel Song Didn't necessarily get an abundance of new things. Lady, I think, is an interesting option, as I mentioned, particularly after a whole new world. You can suddenly play Lady off the whole new world and Smee. Like, imagine that, like your opponent uses whole new world and then they dump a Lady down on the board and they also call in Smee at the same time. Like, that is just so much tempo. Questing for 4 across 2 bodies with 5 willpower and 5 strength as well is absolutely absurd. So I think Lady's a really interesting dynamic. The other card which is very fascinating in this one is Beyond the Horizon, and this is definitely one of the, if not the most talked about card coming into the new set. This is a sing together steel song, and you choose any number of players. So when you're playing core constructed, that's going to be you and your opponent, or just you or just your opponent, and then they discard their hand and draw 3 new cards each. Not sure how good this one will actually be in Steel Song, but I definitely wanted to draw your attention to it. I also think a card like Mulan, the 1-cost Mulan, which can draw and discard a card, is quite interesting with this, because obviously you're not going to want this if you've got a whole new world, but if you don't have a whole new world, it is another way of drawing cards, which could help you find your whole new world. And the other thing that's interesting about it is if you sing a whole new world, you could then sing this the same turn, only targeting your opponent. Suddenly, instead of them getting 7 cards, they would only get 3. So it's definitely got a fair bit of potential. I think you're going to be even more impressed with the potential in Emerald Steel, and we'll be looking at that in just a little bit. Up next, we've got Sapphire Steel, Kiwi Birds, as people in the community call it. And this one is very, very fascinating. Didn't get that many new things, but what it got is absolutely fascinating. And I've actually built this deck in quite a different way to how most people build it. Let's start with the brand new cards, which is Arthur. Honestly, one of the cards I'm most excited to try. It is a Sapphire and Steel Dual Ink 4-cost with a 6/6 stat line which quests for 3, which is absolutely absurd. It's overpowered, but that's because its ability is a huge downside. You skip your draw step. Now, if your opponent's got a Diablo exerted, that sounds absolutely fantastic, but in every other scenario, that is of course going to be a downside. But with stats like that, you can still make it work. Obviously synergy there with Doc as well. And speaking of Doc, we've got the action version of Doc, Desperate Plan, which I think is one of the Chase Enchanteds of the set. It works in a similar way to Doc, except instead of discarding your hand and drawing 2, you discard as many cards as you want in your hand and draw up to 3. So let's say you have Doc in hand and Desperate Plan. You could play Desperate Plan, choose not to discard Doc and draw 2 new cards, or you could discard the Doc and draw 3 new cards. So it's got a bit of extra flexibility. It refills your hand a little bit more, but obviously you don't have any kind of body on the board, and it costs a little bit more. So I would say Doc is probably better on average, but these cards can work together, but also they have a bit of anti-synergy between them as well. That's where Mulan can also be quite interesting as an option in this deck, as a way of discarding one that you don't need. And I mentioned that I've built this deck a little bit differently to most people, and that's because why are people not playing Belle and Porpsicle in this deck? If Belle and Porpsicle are good enough in Blurple, surely that it has to also be good enough in this deck. When I'm building this deck, one of the weakest parts of it is the 1-cost characters. I like Mulan, but there's not really that many other 1-costs I like. Happy's not that good. I'm not a huge fan of the Mickey, although it's all right. I don't like Robin Hood at all. But Belle with Porpsicle and Storm and Strength sounds absolutely absurd, and it gives you some serious high roll potential. This deck is just consistently good, but with the addition of Belle, I think that you've got also that high roll potential to really, really catch your opponents off guard and steal wins, which you shouldn't have been. I think this deck's got huge potential, and it's one I'm really excited to play around with more. Up next, one of the decks I'm most excited for this set, and it's Challenge Matters Ruby Steel. And in many ways, it's quite a similar deck to Sapphire Steel. It also struggles in the 1-cost character department. I did end up going for Happy in this one, but also this Moana 3/2 has some interesting synergy with Flynn Rider. Flynn Rider went out of fashion a little bit at the start of the last set because Belle was so much in the meta, that 3/3, which often came down on turn 1. But with that being less prevalent, I think Flynn Rider has a bit of the space to work. And particularly in this deck, you need the Flynn Rider probably to have a real chance against Ruby Sapphire. You're just going to be too slow otherwise. But hopefully with Flynn Rider, you're quick enough to beat Ruby Sapphire while having enough board presence and enough board control to have a really good chance against other decks. This deck always struggled for card draw, but now with Desperate Plan added into the mix, you have suddenly solved the deck's biggest downside, which is card draw. And again, if you look at the Sapphire Steel deck, I only had 2 Desperate Plans. Here I've got 4. It's really just something you're going to have to play around with and experiment with to see what is the right mix. It's impossible for me to know until I've actually played. Maybe like 3 Desperate Plans and 4 docks might be a bit better, but Mulan's going to be absolutely crucial, this 1-cost Mulan, in helping you mitigate the downsides. And speaking of Mulan, look at this 4-cost Mulan. It's actually the super rare foil in the starter deck. It's not a card which looks that amazing at first glance, but it really fits an interesting niche in this deck, which is absolutely necessary. And that is its ability to turn evasive during your own turn and be able to challenge ready characters. 2 really powerful abilities at once. But added to that, the fact that it's a Mulan that costs 4 is so much synergy with these 2 big expensive Mulans. This 6-cost Elite Archer, when it was first revealed, everyone thought that Ravensburger had lost the plot and that they had just printed one of the most broken cards in the game. It never materialized, but I have a feeling that now might be the time. You've got 2 tremendously strong shift targets for this Mulan in the deck, but there's also the other Mulan here, which is not one which people really remember. It came out in the last set, and I think it's got huge potential. If this character challenges another character, your other characters gain the ability to challenge ready characters, and it's a 5/6 evasive. Very, very fascinating deck. I think Seven Dwarfs Mine is a nice little addition into this deck because you do want your opponent to be exerting and taking challenges, and the Seven Dwarfs Mine can force your opponent to do that. And you also get that little bit of extra control with Happy and Doc moving in there. The deck doesn't have many good 1-drops. If you don't like the Seven Dwarfs Mine, you could play the Mickey instead. I think another card which is maybe supposed to be in this deck is Strength of a Raging Fire to give you that little bit of extra control. You can sing that with your Pete's and your Sisus. And Namiri is another really interesting card coming into this set. I put 1 in there just as something to bear in mind. She's also a card you could try in a lot of other steel decks. She's going to give you some consistency, some power, some questing power potentially as well. Not exactly sure on the Namiri, but it's one I wanted to highlight as something with serious potential. Up next, we've got Ruby Sapphire, and I don't think a lot changed here, but I did want to draw your attention to 2 cards which are new, which I think might have the chance of breaking into some of these lists. This is Ratigan, which is an amazing artwork by Matthew Robert Davies, and it's a warded character which quests for 4 and has huge stats. But it comes with the downside that you have to ink this turn or it'll be banished. Not sure it'll actually end up being good enough, but it's definitely got potential. It could be a nice closer. And the other card, which I think a lot of people are going to be testing, is Down in New Orleans. It's a song card, so of course has nice synergy with Maui Half Shark. And it's definitely got some interesting potential with the Half Shark in particular, because you can recycle the Down in New Orleans from the Half Shark. You're not able to sing it with the 5-cost Maui, which I think might be a bit of a deal breaker for an uninkable in this slot. Obviously, Ruby Sapphire also has the potential of going down the item route, and the deck did get quite a lot of new items. I didn't feel quite comfortable enough sharing an item build before I had an opportunity to test it. So just this one for now, but if you like your item builds of Ruby Sapphire, there's definitely a lot of interesting things to experiment with in that one. Up next, we've got a pet deck of mine. It's Ruby and Emerald. Long-time viewers of the channel will know that this has been a deck, a personal favorite deck of mine, and I just haven't touched it in the past couple of sets because it didn't get much new things. But this set has changed that entirely. Emerald Discard is in a fascinating position, in my opinion, coming into this set because of this card Chip. This 4-cost chip card I think is so good and exactly what Emerald decks need. Very, very similar to the Amber Daisy Duck, who's a 2/3 and quest for 1, and they have the same ability. When you play this character, an opponent chooses and discards a card. But Daisy Duck doesn't really see that much play. She's like play as a one-of, so why is Chip so much better? Well, that's because Amber, when you pair it with Emerald, you have Forgotten Me, that 4-cost action which discards 2 cards at once. But every other Emerald color combination doesn't have access to that Daisy Duck until now. Chip is exactly that card, and in a deck which doesn't have access to You Have Forgotten Me, this is absolutely huge. Honestly, I cannot tell you how excited I am for this chip card. I think it really is going to bring me back to my roots of enjoying discard decks. But that's not the only new discard card which Ruby and Emerald got, because it also got possibly my most hyped card for the set, just because it means so much to me as someone that loves Ruby Emerald, which is Undermine. It's an action which obviously has huge synergy with Robin Hood Sharpshooter, and you make your opponent discard a card, and one of your characters gets, or one of your opponent's characters for that matter, gets +2 strength this turn. So this is a card which you could use on illusions to immediately banish them, and we're looking at illusions next, by the way, but it also forces your opponent to discard a card, all while having synergy with Robin Hood. The other new card that this deck got is the Lilo, which is actually my chase legendary card for the set, and it is an absolutely fascinating effect in this deck. It's a 4/4 that quests for 2 and has 2 abilities. During your turn, if you've played 3 or more actions this turn, you may play this character for free. Now, after when I start testing, it's possible with this deck I want to start adding more actions which are cheaper and cycle the deck. Things like Strike a Good Match, which can be sung. Things like Improvise, which costs 1 and draws a card. These kinds of very cheap actions might need to be included more in the deck, rather than these expensive things like a Pirate's Life, to make use of playing Lilo for free. With the current setup, it might prove after testing to be too difficult to achieve that, but her other ability is also incredibly strong, which is when you play this character, ready, chosen character, they can't quest for the rest of this turn. That is going to be absolutely outstanding with the Robin Hood Sharpshooter. You quest with the Robin Hood Sharpshooter, you find a big, powerful action, something like a Hypnotize or a Bruno or a Pirate's Life, and then you play the Lilo to ready your Robin Hood, and it just sits there ready to go for the next turn. But there's also synergy there with something like Prince John, right? Just being able to quest with your Prince John and then ready your Prince John. Or, for example, there's synergy there with more Lilos or Pegasus, where you could quest with them, ready them, and then sing a song with them. And that's why Pegasus is in here. I think Pegasus is really underrated in these decks. This Morph could also be the 2-cost Pegasus. I just decided to go for Morph instead, so there's a little bit of extra consistency on the Diablo shift, but that's possibly the thing I'm most unsure on. The Ruby Pegasus would look more obvious in this deck, but the Morph is a real sign of my boldness and how much I've actually thought about this list. Now, the elephant in the room here is what card is missing, because you need a lot of actions to fit this, and it's actually the Ursula Deceiver 2-drop, which is going to sound absolutely outrageous, but trust me, there is method to the madness. My logic is that Ursula 2-drop is a non-guaranteed discard, and in this deck, if you play the Ursula 2 and it misses, it feels so crippling. It feels absolutely terrible. It's not a card you want to play on turn 2. You want a bunch of actions, so your Robin Hood has the best possible chance, and we already have so much discard with the Hypnotize, the Undermine, the Sudden Chill, and the Chip. I think if ever there's a discard deck which could entirely cut the Ursula 2, it's this one, because you play Undermine instead. Also, bear in mind, Pegasus, if you shift it, turns all of your characters evasive, which is insanely strong with Merfolks and Prince Johns and Robin Hoods. Pegasus shift into Singing Bruno is an insane line. I am so excited to try this one out more. Like I say, definitely some things I might tweak the more I play, but I think it's got serious legs. Like, the discard archetypes are going to be exciting. Obviously, Hidden Cove might work with Diablo. You could try versions without Diablo. All sorts of interesting stuff. Up next, we've got Illusions. Now, this, of all the decks, is the one where I think anybody could have built this. I basically just went on Dreamborn, typed in Illusion, and clicked on all of them, and then added in the core cards. So every card in this deck is every single Illusion, plus Friends, Fox, Smee, and some one drops that I like, and Calhoun, and also the Peter Pan because it has synergy with the Argo. The illusions I'm not so sure about. I have a feeling that just normal Amethyst Steel might prove to be better, but it's certainly a deck that's worth experimenting with, isn't it? And the more, if you're bothering to play illusions, you really just want to invest and play as many as possible, because Jafar and the Sultan all have synergy with more illusions, as does the Magic Carpet. It's going to be an interesting one. I actually think that the 5-cost Jafar and the 5-cost Sultan are really good, and that makes the Abu potentially really good because you can cheat it out and play it for free. So it's definitely a deck I'm going to be testing, and I'm excited to see, but how good it is remains to be seen. But we're not done yet. We've got 2 more decks to look at. First, or penultimately, we've got Emerald Steel. Now, this is one of the most talked about decks coming into the new set, and I don't know exactly how to build it, so feel free to use your own spin on it. But obviously, Diablo Hidden Cove is something you might want to play as well. But Beyond the Horizon is absolutely game-changing, potentially, in this deck and how the play patterns of it operate. So Beyond the Horizon is this Sing Together card we looked at in Amber Steel, but the synergy that this card has with Prince John is absolutely through the roof. Again, you can choose any number of players and they discard their hands and then draw 3 cards. So forcing your opponent to just discard their hand and then each player draws 3 is really, really powerful with Prince John. Suddenly your Prince John is like a turbocharged card draw engine. So you're maybe less reliant on Diablo, which I think could be a good thing. I think Chip, as mentioned in that Ruby Emerald deck, is a great addition to this deck. Namari and Pete are still nice, interesting top-end options. I went for Mulan in at 1 because I think it's a great card, and it just maybe gives you a little bit of consistency in being able to discard Beyond the Horizon when it's not really doing too much. Because, of course, the other thing with Beyond the Horizon is you can use Ursula, Deceiver of All, to double sing it. So if you've got an Ursula and, let's say, Chip down on the board, you could sing together the Beyond the Horizon, force your opponent to discard their hand, draw 3 cards, and discard it again. And if you've got Prince John down as well, that's going to absolutely turbocharge your hand and leave you with so many cards in hand. So there's a really interesting dynamic there. Emerald Steel, if it can become less reliant on Diablo and less high rolly, I think has real potential. As mentioned in the Ruby Emerald deck, I think that Chip is a game changer for discard decks. It's the kind of card I've been waiting for really since set 3. I think it's got huge potential, and I'm really excited to actually experiment with some of these Emerald discard decks without Diablo entirely, which of course might happen with rotation. We'll have to wait and see. Diablo's still a menace, but if Peter Pan... If Diablo's too good, the meta warps around it, and then Peter Pan becomes popular, and then Diablo comes worse. So there's definitely the potential for these discard decks to do well without Diablo. And again, I think that this Chip card is honestly incredible. I'm so excited. Also, just that 3 strength is just so nice for a deck like this. Often these decks can actually struggle a little bit for board presence, but again, we're at the 8th set. The card pool's the biggest it's ever been, and after this set, the card pool's going to shrink as we rotate out 4 sets and only have 1 new set. So definitely experiment. There's lots of different options, that is for sure. But the final deck, last but certainly not least, is a pet deck of mine, and it is Emerald and Sapphire. Now, of course, there's other decks we didn't mention, like we'll get onto. These aren't the only decks that you can play. These are just the ones that I felt comfortable enough sharing really interesting lists. And this deck really struggles against Amber Steel, but if we do enter a meta where Amber Steel begins to struggle, I think that Emerald Sapphire is a deck which could rise to the top. And it got 2 really new interesting cards, which I think improve the deck. Basil is the first, this 7-cost Inkable. When you play it, you may return chosen character to their player's hands. That includes your own, if you so desire, which is definitely possible with some of the cards that you might play, you know, just picking up a Belle, for example, and then replaying her, or picking up a Tala, or picking up a Tamatoa, whatever it might be. There's definitely some potential there, but moreover, you're going to be using it to bounce back your opponent's cards, and that's actually amazing because it's targeted as well, and it's a way of controlling the board which doesn't rely on songs. Usually, if your opponent plays a Pete at the right moment, you just fold, you just lose, you've got no more control tools, but Basil actually provides one of those. But the other thing that Basil does is it also gives you a way of discarding that 1 card in your opponent's hand. Often with this deck, you're going to use Bend to My Will, and then your opponent might be in a position where they have one card in hand. Well, Basil absolutely punishes that, and if you have an opportunity to bounce things back with the Muses, or you're welcome, you can then quest with Basil and get that discard through. And it's also just got really good stats. 5/4 is competing for the board, and it's doing what you want it to. The other card, which there's only one copy of in, but honestly, I could see a world where you play more, is Heads Held High. It's a Sing Together 6, and it has 2 parts. You remove up to 3 damage from any number of chosen characters, which is interesting. Like, realistically, you're probably only going to be healing 1 card, but healing in this deck is pretty relevant because you do fight for board control quite a bit, and being able to heal 3 is not insignificant on something like a Bell or a Muses or a Clarabelle, whatever it might be. But the big part is all opposing characters get -3 strength this turn. And of course, because this is a song, this means that you could sing this with Tipo plus the Muses to set all of your opponent's cards to -3. And maybe you even want to consider with Heads Held High trying to play Under the Sea. I think it would be a little bit too much, right? I mean, you could maybe like hard cast the Heads Held High and then sing together the Under the Sea. There's some potential there. But I think just the ability to bounce back annoying characters with the Muses, or make favorable trades even, right? Like setting your opponent's Fox to 1 strength and then taking it out with a Tala. It's really not bad at all. It's a song, so it has big synergy with the Muses immediately, and there's a lot of things that you can actually just sing it with, like the Clarabelle, the Basil, the Tamatoa, which you wouldn't feel too bad about. And also with the Sing Together, you can use Tipo plus one of your 4 drops. I think it's a really, really interesting card. The other key thing in this deck is 4 Bend to My Wills. Most people are going to tell you that I'm crazy and you should only play 3. You just got to trust me that 4 is the magic number. This is a discard deck, and you have to treat it as such. If Amber Steel struggles in this meta, this deck has serious potential. But if Amber Steel continues to be one of the best and most popular decks, then this deck is not quite ready. It's incredibly difficult to play, but it's incredibly rewarding as well. Well, that is all of the decks for today. Thanks again to Card Market for sponsoring the video. Honourable mentions to many of the other decks which have serious potential: Ruby and Amethyst, Amethyst Steel, like mid-range, Emerald Amethyst, like all these kinds of decks that we're used to. Just if your deck wasn't shared in my video, that doesn't mean it's bad. There's also fun theme decks like puppy decks and all sorts, so make sure you subscribe for more Disney Lorcana decks for the Reign of Jafar. Give the video a like, and if you did watch this far and you want to support me further, don't forget to check out my Metafy page where I can give you one-to-one deck support, as well as also there's a PayPal link if you guys want to donate. I don't paywall any of my content. There's a little bit of a theme in the Lorcana community at the moment to do so and put deck guides and decks behind paywalls. I want to try and keep this free and accessible for everyone, and if you appreciate what I do and feel no pressure, of course, to support me directly, I'd really appreciate it. That would be awesome. And all the money that I get will be reinvested into the channel, whether that's traveling to events, new equipment, buying cards, or getting my own place and a better studio for recording card games. Thanks so much for all the support as always. I greatly appreciate every single one of you for supporting me and what I do. Really excited to test out the set and looking forward to bringing you some more high level deck guides, because I am stepping up the deck guides for this set. Look out for those.